Welcome to the Idea Talks, where we discuss big ideas. The Idea Talks is a bi-weekly podcast with Josh Tice and other leaders on big ideas for life, leadership, and ministry. And I'm your co-host, Drew Planencia, and we are glad you're here. For more information on this podcast, visit ideanetwork.church.
Today's big idea is stop trying. How to receive, not achieve, your real identity. That's right, we're talking to Cary Schmidt about his awesome new resource. Let's go.
Welcome to this edition of the Idea Talks. On today's episode, we have a very special guest with us, the Idea Summit 2021 speaker, Cary Schmidt. Cary's the senior pastor of Emmanuel Baptist Church in Newington, Kentucky, or not Kentucky, Connecticut.
Kentucky?
I'm so sorry.
You said Kentucky.
I didn't mean to say that.
I don't want that edited out because when you make a mistake, it's so shocking to me.
I'm so sorry.
Everybody needs to know. You need to stop trying so hard.
I'll stop trying so hard. He and his wife, Diana, have been married over 30 years now.
He got that wrong, too.
The Princess Diana from the movie.
I'm just done at this point.
She's Wonder Woman. You're married to Wonder Woman. How about that?
Yeah. He and his wife, Dana,
there it is,
have 3 great children, 4 grandchildren, and Cary survived cancer just over 10 years ago. So remember that, following you throughout that journey and God's, working your life there. So we're excited to have you on the podcast. I apologize for butchering your wife's name. You'll have to apologize to her later for me.
I will tell Diana you are very sorry, and I'm glad to be with you guys. Thanks for your friendship. Thanks for letting me come on the podcast.
Hey, it's not a bad name, though. If you're going to make a mistake from Dana to Diana, that's a good name. We almost named one of our children Diana, but we went with Scarlett instead. Scarlett from Scarlett O'Hara. You know where that's from?
I do.
Yeah. So there it is. Cary, thank you so much. Man, the book, fantastic. You told me about this book probably over a year ago, telling me you're writing it. The process of writing a book, it just has got to take so long, huh?
It is hard work. It is laborious. Yeah, it's a labor. Everybody, I did an interview yesterday with a guy, and he said everybody wants to have written a book, but very few people want to write a book and do the actual work.
Well, you're on the end part of that, and you have written a book, and now you're just in the, publishing the book stage, or what is it? Promoting the book stage. So we're glad that you're out here to do this. And really, your book doesn't need much promotion as it relates to our circle. The folks that listen to this podcast love you. We're fans of yours. We love your other books that you've written. Most of the people, or a lot of the people listening to this episode, may even give away some of your books at their church. And let me just throw this out. I know this is not what the episode is about, but if you don't give away the book Done, you need to order a copy of the book Done, Pastor. For yourself. You'll read it in 20 minutes. It's a great, simple gospel explanation. Multiple times I've had visitors from the church bring that book back to me after visiting the church and say, I read this and I did what it said. Yeah. And I wouldn't want them to use that exact terminology to explain their salvation, but I know exactly what they meant, and it gave a great basis for which I can begin discipleship. So, Cary, thank you for that book. You know that's been a world changer for a lot of people.
Well, I just thank the Lord. He's taken that book places that I never would have imagined. And the stories that I've heard, just every week, really, I hear different stories of, it's a non-confrontational presentation and it's a thorough gospel presentation. So it's not like a tract, but it goes into the gospel. It's 10 or 12 chapters, and we use it for we call it starting point class, but for new people that come to Emmanuel, and we have 10 or 20 people that go through that every quarter just to understand the gospel. But I sure thank the Lord for how he's used it.
Yeah, the book is called Done, and you can pick it up anywhere. Fantastic resource. But the book that we're talking about today is Stop Trying, How to Receive, Not Achieve Your Real Identity. Cary, in part 1 of the book, Losing, there are 3 parts. I guess you know that. You talk about the necessity, the necessary step of losing your identity so that God can replace it with your real identity. The illustration of Peter just really hits home. Here's my question. Do you see God doing this with other characters of the Bible?
Every single one of them. I mean, anyone that seriously followed God had to lose themselves and then embrace his definition of who they were. And I mean, you can start with Abraham, who God said, I am your shield and exceeding great reward. And he said, well, where are my kids then? Why don't I have a family? And that just unfolding story with Abraham of God saying, "You're the father of a great nation. You don't know it yet, but that's who you are." And Abraham deciding whether he would really believe that, whether he would really be able to pack up and walk away from everything he knew, leave your land, your father, your family, and go to where I'm showing you to go. So the losing, finding, flourishing pattern is from start to finish. It is the very essence of what it means to follow Jesus.
It is that thing where you begin. I forget what it's called, but when you buy a yellow car, you suddenly see the yellow car everywhere. Same concept whenever it comes to this pattern in the scripture, right? You can see it in the life of Job. You can see it in the life of every single one of the New Testament characters. Clearly, you can see it in the life of Joseph. It's a constant reevaluation of who I am in light of the gospel or in light of God's revelation to me of who God wants me to be. It's beautifully stated.
Yeah, and before we really go all in and follow God, we have strands of that identity, but we misappropriate them, we misunderstand them, we weave them together in ways that we don't fully grasp. So Joseph, had this sense, right, from God that he's going to somehow be pivotal, instrumental in delivering his family. But he never would have imagined that going through a pit, into slavery, through a prison, and then, through random chain of events into prominence in Egypt. So how, Joseph would have understood somehow that he had this dream and idea and vision. He just never would have understand. He would have to lose all of his idea of what that was going to be like before he ever could reclaim what it would truly be like.
Okay, now this is blowing my mind because now as you're talking, I'm thinking about Jesus, the only person in Scripture that doesn't go through this journey. At the age of 12, there he is talking to rabbis, and his parents are like, "Where were you?" And he's like, "Don't you know what I'm supposed to be about?" Yeah. And then even when he's about to be crucified, the Bible, I love it in John, I think it's chapter 13, the Bible says, knowing full well who he was, he laid aside his garment, picked up the towel and the basin, knelt before the disciples and washed their feet. He was never in an identity crisis, never confused about where this was going, knew exactly what. So the contrast now that you bring it out in my mind is, you're right, every single one of these people, and then it's like, oh, and also here's Jesus.
Yeah, yeah. And what he was doing the whole time was getting them off of their script, teaching them his script, his understanding of who they are, and trying to get them to believe him. Would you not just believe who I am, but believe who that makes you? Like if you believe in me, then that makes you who I say you are. And it's a completely, salvation is, yes, it's receiving of redemption, forgiveness, eternal life in heaven, but it's so much more than a ticket to heaven. It's a complete re-identification of who I am. It's coming back into alignment with who my Creator says I am. But that's a long, long process. It's a long journey, and it starts with losing.
Well, thanks for explaining that to us. Has this happened in your own life at different times?
Yeah, and I would say it's a process that continues to happen. It's not a one-time process. I share in the book a couple of times that it did happen in deep, profound, nuclear ways. The one was cancer, and the second was, the call from a large, huge ministry context to a small, discouraged church in Connecticut. It was just kind of a leap into what felt like oblivion to me. I didn't know any of the outcomes. I didn't know what I was getting into. It was truly my Abraham moment of God saying, walk away from everything you know and follow me. And I was like, where? And he goes, I'll show you. When we get there, I'll show you. So it was completely disorienting.
So you define in the book identity being your deepest sense of self, and these three kind of things that are developed as a result of that: acceptance, security, and significance. Can you unpack that a little bit for our audience?
Yeah, the concept of identity is really an intangible, which makes that book really hard to write for me. It was something I had to wrestle with terms, and most people have not spent a lot of time consciously thinking about what is their identity and where are they looking to form their identity. So deepest sense of self, it's all of that inner being, it's all that inner man. The word Jesus used is, the Greek word is suke. And when Jesus said, whosoever would lose his life Whosoever would save his life will lose it. But whosoever will lose his life for my sake in the gospels, the same shall save it. That word life, there's 3 New Testament words for life. The one he uses is suke, which is where we get our word psyche. So it's my inner being, my inner self, my inner definition. And the diagnostic is those 3 words you talked about, Drew. It's where, if you want to know where you're finding your identity, then ask yourself these 3 questions. Where do I look for security? Like, what do I think is holding me together? For most people, that's their job. It's what they do, how they pay their bills. Where do I look for significance? What's giving me a sense of meaning? What's getting me out of bed in the morning? For many, that's our metrics of success. For many pastors, it's how many people are coming to the church, what's the financial situation, how many people have been saved and baptized and discipled recently. So metrics of success. So security, significance, and acceptance. Who do I need approval from? Where do I look for that sense of validation that I have meaning, I have value, I have purpose in this life?
And that's where you begin to blow apart traditional identity. Traditional identity, as you define it in the book, others define who I am. Modern identity, which is so frustrating to those who come from a traditional identity point of view, I define who I am. And then you say gospel identity is my creator or Jesus defining who I am, which is so freeing and so different than both traditional identity and modern identity.
I love how you unpack the acceptance there too, because, I've even heard some celebrities say like, hey, if you have a problem with me, call me. And if you don't have my number, then you don't get to vote. And I love that, your acceptance should come from, your inner circle and ultimately from God. I love that concept.
I do too. In page 158 of your book, you address this, I think, head on. You said after Jesus' resurrection, his followers began to operate from strength and affirmation rather than for it. This living from a place of acceptance, a living from a place of strength, living from a place of affirmation rather than for this. I guess my question is, you're really dealing with weak identities here. And you touched on this a moment ago. What weak identities do you see that ministry leaders tend to cling to?
Well, we ping pong between both the traditional and the modern. And in ministry contexts, these are very, very common and prevalent. And these terms really help me kind of wrap my brain around it. It's so hard to, in a short podcast, do a deep dive into the ideas of this book, because this is the kind of thing that it's a can of worms that you just never get the worms back into the can. Once you see this, you see it everywhere. So to say a traditional identity is others define me, it's so radically reductionist of the idea, but basically it's horizontal, and it's looking to man-made structures or systems for validation, security, acceptance, for success, for a sense of belonging, a sense of self. All of us came into the world, and this is the identity we learned from the earliest of ages. We were told who we were. By who? Our parents. We defined ourselves by who others said we were, by how we lived up to others' expectations in school, sports, college, church. Okay. Most, early on, at least, most Jesus followers view Jesus as another traditional identity. Like, I'm living up to his demands. I'm gaining his approval by being a good Christian. And that's what so many church contexts are. So as ministry leaders, a traditional identity kind of fleshes out in terms of, I am a success based on, or failure based on, the affirmation, the metrics that others have defined around me, the systems, the circles, the spheres of influence or denominations in which I grew up. The better I fit that mold, the more affirmation I receive, the more I feel a belonging. I have a sense of self in that. And that's a traditional identity. Now, I hate to be so long in my answer, Josh, but just to swing the pendulum, over time, that comes to the surface like a boil or like a pimple that just begins to be irritating. Why? Because it's imposed on me. And it on one hand, it's noble because I'm honoring my heritage and I'm honoring others and I'm serving and giving my life to these things. And they might be good things. But the sense that it's conditional, like if I don't live up to this, these people are going to reject me. That conditional love starts to wear on me. The fear and the anxiety of if I don't dot every line, I and cross every T, then I'm going to get rejected. Fear, anxiety. Why? Because I can lose that identity. Because it's built on others' validation, I can lose it. So over time, this boil of resentment starts to grow. Like, why am I doing these things? And the answer is, I'm doing them so everybody will approve of me. And then the subconscious narrative is, why do I have to earn their approval? And I become the hostage to that traditional. Well, then the answer to it, the temptation is run for your life, like liberate yourself. And we spiritualize like the prodigal journey. And suddenly I got to go be who I have to be. We sometimes use the gospel or the word grace like wallpaper over top of nothing more than a run into self-liberation. I'm going to go be whoever I want to be because I can be. So to summarize it, there's this tension, there's this tug of war psychologically and spiritually between, do I have to be who others say I have to be? Or do I have to be who I want? Can I be who I want to be? It's like a tension between community and individuality. And here's the problem, Josh, and maybe we can unpack this a little more. There's a strand of truth in both of those. Like, community is important and individuality is important, but neither one on its own is sufficient to give me the identity I'm really looking for.
What a devilish plot. I mean,
yes.
in the truest sense, if he can get us to say, man, I can't live up to this traditional identity anymore. I'm exhausted of living up to it. The only way out, and he pushes us to, here's another option. How about modern identity? You define who you are. And I've seen myself say it. I've heard my friends say it. I just need to be who I am. And there's so much of a taste and almost a tinge of modern identity. I define me, not you anymore. And the reality is we've just gone from one ditch into the other.
Exactly. And we don't realize it because we're labeling it with gospel and gracious words like it's noble somehow. And in one sense, we are liberating ourselves from the legitimately oppressive aspects of traditional identity. Like there's legitimate problem with that, but we're not noticing that we've traded one idol for another. The idol of external validation we've traded for the idol of internal liberation. Like, I'm going to be me. And that is an equally deceptive and dangerous idol.
Well, yeah, and you can see it even in evangelical celebrities who not just move away from their tradition, they eventually can move away from the faith and truly apostatize and deny the faith. I mean, this is just our podcast. I mean, we talk guys like Josh Harris, the tragic nature of what you saw there, of a complete denial of the faith in the end. Where does this come from? And I can see it as a moving away from traditional identity to a modern identity. I define me, not a gospel identity. Jesus defines who I am.
Yeah, and that's so it's a false dichotomy. Where we end up by about middle of that book is there another alternative? Do I have to be who others say I am, or do I have to swim forever in this lonely ocean of being who I want to be, and this searching for this true self, and putting on one identity to the next, like a lot of guys speaking through the ministry context, a lot of guys that have swung the pendulum into, I'm going to go rebrand myself, totally reinvent myself on social media, all of it, and just be me. They don't realize that contrived identity is going to have a short life cycle. They're going to outgrow it. They're going to get bored with it. It's going to fail them. And they're going to have to reinvent themselves until they finally just go, I tried this ministry thing and it's a joke. It's a false dichotomy though. I don't have to give up my community to go be me. And I don't have to give up my unique individuality to be or fulfill the expectations of others. there really is a third option, and that is let Jesus define me. And huge statement that we've been half the book unpacking. How does that even happen? What does it look like? It's not the essence of the book is it's not something you try or work at. It's actually something you allow to happen to you as you follow Jesus. Peter didn't try to become the great fisher of men that had a great harvest at Pentecost. He became that because he followed Jesus, and Jesus reclaimed him and put him back in the ministry. And then we trace in the book the transformation of these followers of Jesus after they really understood who Jesus was, after the reality of his resurrection. They behaved completely differently than before. They were totally transformed, but it wasn't a work they did to themselves. It was a work that materialized organically. I think they were even surprised by it, to be honest with you.
Well, you say transformation, and we talk about the results of gospel identity. Another term could be the rewards. I don't. The word reward sometimes might give us the idea that I'm trying to earn it, but there are natural results. There are natural benefits, rewards to a gospel identity. Two of which I really want to specifically ask you about. People say, okay, so what? If I have a gospel identity, what does it do for me? And two things that I've seen come out in your book, and I've seen in my life and in others, is there is a demolition. Gospel identity demolishes insecurity and bitterness. Insecurity of I've constantly got to prove myself to others, and bitterness toward maybe those in the past. Can you talk? I know those are totally different concepts, but they are the rewards, it seems. They are two of the great benefits of getting my identity from Jesus rather than from tradition or modern identity. What would you say to them?
Well, yeah, perfect love casts out fear. And what is insecurity? Insecurity is fear. Insecurity is I'm afraid of losing something that I'm holding on too tightly here. I'm afraid of losing your approval, your acceptance. I'm afraid of losing my place. So the gospel gives you 100% comprehensive security. You can never lose that security. You are absolutely, think of the three words, security, significance, acceptance. In the gospel, you are 1,000% secured eternally. You are security, significance. You are the highest being in the universe says you're so significant, I died for you. Like if God is pleased with you, it doesn't matter who's displeased. Okay. Now, in one breath, that can sound snarky, right? Like I don't have to please men because God is pleased. We can use that as like an ace up our sleeve. But in truth, in biblical, humble, broken truth before God, yes, if I know that God is pleased with me in Jesus, when he is calling me and leading me forward, I can follow him no matter who is displeased. So security, acceptance, significance and acceptance. God 100% accepts me. This is the idea of living from fullness rather than for it. The traditional and modern identity goes out life looking for love, looking for fulfillment, looking for all these things. But the gospel says you have it all. Like you already have it all. So start from full, so all insecurity vanishes. I think it's a long process of letting it go. And the way God does it, by the way, is he gradually takes away the sources which you were looking to for security. That's what the loss is. Okay. And you panic a little bit in the loss. You're kind of like feeling like you're in a free fall, but then you land on a soft landing in the grace of God, and you find out you're okay.
I don't have the ministry that I had 3 months ago. I don't have the respect that I had 3 months ago. I don't have the friendship or the relationship I had 3 months ago. And God pulls those things away to tell you you're still secure.
You're still okay.
I still have you.
You feel for a second breathless psychologically, like you are in a free fall, like the bottom just fell out from under you. But you land and you go, oh, no, I really am okay. The disorientation fades a little bit, and you start to find that God and the gospel are truly the solid ground that was always under your fake ground. And when the ground gave way, boom, you land and you're okay. So coming back to your point of bitterness, why do we hold on to bitterness? Why do we have trouble forgiving? Because we didn't get what we felt we deserved from that person. We got hurt instead of love. We got abuse instead of security or significance. Bitterness, resentment, scorn, unforgiveness, even anger at some point is evidence that my heart was looking to you. If I'm angry at you, what I'm saying is, you didn't give me what I think I deserve from you. So that bitterness is a warning light on the dashboard. I was looking to you for something I didn't get, so I resent you. I hold it against you. Well, how does that give way? Wait a minute. I've got everything I need from Jesus. Why do I need to waste time being bitter at you?
Why would I be angry with you for not giving me what I need? When I look behind me, I already have everything I need. So it's a waste of time, energy, and everything to be upset with you.
It's a waste of life.
Right.
It's a waste of life.
Oh,
and now
that.
I can have a different view of you. You're not my user. You're a person that needs the same grace and gospel that I've received. And now I actually not only am healed from your hurt, but I want you to be healed, because I realize maybe you hurt me out of hurt that exists in your life. You and I had a conversation, I don't want to go into it, on the phone not long ago, where you said, oh, give me a totally different view of that person. And you said it caused me actually to pity them. Remember saying that, Josh?
Yeah.
That's what a gospel identity would give you for even hurt you. What did Jesus do on the cross? Father, forgive them.
Yeah.
Where did that show up in the book of Acts, in the lives of Jesus' followers? Stephen is begging his accusers, his oppressors, to listen to him. He knows they're about to kill him. He says, brethren, fathers, brethren, hear me. Mm-hmm. And at the end of that all, they're stoning him. And he says, Lord, lay not this sin to charge. Wow. Stephen should have maybe legally, if he'd been a good 21st century American, the political figure, he would have fought for his rights. He would have stormed the halls of power for legal representation. But no, what did he do? He prayed that, where did that come from? Did he take a class? In Acts, I think, where did all this behavior come from? And it really came organically because they really did realize who they were.
We're seeing gospel identity playing out in our local context, in our local churches. I'm sure the guys listening to this are seeing the same thing. You see a family come in, a man, a woman, and their children, and you come to find out that this man gets saved, and his wife gets saved, and his stepchildren get saved, and they're all sitting there as a family, and it's awesome. And then the next thing you see, a couple weeks later, a couple months later, sitting right beside him is another woman and another set of children. And you're like, okay, what is this all about? And you go and you meet him after a couple of weeks, and, oh yeah, Pastor, this is my ex-wife, and these are my children, and I just wanted to bring them. And then you're like, okay, this could be a little awkward, but it's not. And then months go by, and now she's getting saved, and the other children are getting saved. And what was potentially the most damaging, conflict, bitter relationship he ever had in divorcing and leaving his family has now blossomed and flourished into this beautiful representation of the gospel, where he pities and loves those and brings them to the same gospel that's changing him. It seems like it just eradicated the potential bitterness because he begins to see himself and these people differently.
Yeah, and only the gospel can do that. And that is the best evidence that the gospel is flourishing, where there is true healing, not this fake, this contrived works-based healing, but a real, genuine, organic materialization of, or a dissolving of bitterness, scorn, competitiveness, comparativeness. For me, Josh, a big day of realization that I'm growing was when I stopped noticing what people wore to church. It's like so much of my life was or in certain years or seasons was programmed to look a certain way, be a certain way. And when the gospel really is allowed to flourish, it changes the heart, and it changes your view of who you are and who others are, and that changes everything.
Yeah. Man, I love it. This is a book that each and every one of us ought not only read, but it would be a fantastic book to give to your church members. So many of the books I read are really ministry focused, ministry based. It's great to pass from one pastor to another. This is the kind of book that you could buy dozens of or hundreds of and give out to your church members, and even go through a book study. I would highly recommend this book.
Thanks for taking the time to, unpack this with us. I really appreciate it. Before we let you go, I'd love to just hear from you, why this book right now, and this book released, late 2020. And I think about, all this going on in the world right now. Why did you, have the inspiration to write this as well as release this during this period of time in your life?
This is what's interesting about, just the providence of God. It was an 8-year journey for me to even just wrap my brain around what was happening in my life. What is the work that God was doing? Because there was so much deep loss in the cancer journey, and then in the relocation to Connecticut, so much loss. We don't even have time to go into it. And I was just floundering. I wasn't floundering in my faith or in my call, or like I wasn't going to go get drunk and cheat on my wife. I just was floundering for who am I and where am I and what happened to the life that I worked so hard to build? Like, why did God do this? He just dismantled everything. Mm. And then this 8-year journey of God just showing me, this is the process. This is what I do in everybody's life. And then a couple years ago, Moody reached out and wanted a book proposal. And I was talking to an acquisitions editor, and she said, "What are you passionate about right now?" I said, "Well, with you or whoever, however, the next book I write is going to be about a gospel identity." And she loved the idea. And it was about 6 months later that they committed to me to publish the book. And then over the last, year and a half, it's been in development. It was written, the editing, the final developmental editing was happening right as COVID unfolded. And the reason I felt like that was significant is everybody lost the things they tie their identity to. Everybody experienced this when COVID hit. I mean, I remember calling the editors a couple of times and saying, "Wow, the timing of this pandemic and the civil unrest, it's amazing that this book is releasing at this time." So I think it's timely for the day in which we live. The modern identity narrative is mainstream. I mean, it's in every Disney movie, it's in every college class. The modern identity narrative is the prominent message of our day.
Well, Cary, thank you so much for joining us for this episode. Not only this episode, but we're recording this before the summit, which is next week. Mm-hmm. But at this point, when it releases, the summit will have already gone through. So thank you so much for participating and speaking and being a part of that event. We just love having you out here in Las Vegas and love having you at any Idea Network event. So this is an open invitation. Be a part of the podcast anytime you want, and anything that we're doing. We are just so glad to be your friend and to be connected in this way. And thank you for writing this book. The amount of time that it took for you to put this book together, it's going to be a great benefit, not only to me and all my buddies, but also to the many, many members and Christians that we have influence with. So thank you for that.
Hey, thank you guys. And if I could just take a second and say, Josh, I love you and your team and what you guys do. I have been a big fan of you guys for a long time, cheering you on from the East Coast. I know you take some pot shots and some hits, but your spirit is biblical. And that's probably the highest compliment I can give you. Honestly, I could tell you it's impeccable. It's wonderful. It's incredible. To say it's biblical, I love what you're doing. You're encouraging pastors and churches in this very journey of gospel development and growth. And so I really appreciate your getting behind the book and sharing that. But more than that, just your friendship. This is not commercial. This is you and me are buddies, and I'm glad for that. And nothing will change that.
Yeah, me too. Thanks, buddy.
If you would like to reach out to us, drop us an email at joshtice@ideanetwork.church. If you benefited from this podcast, we ask that you take a moment to show your support by subscribing, rating, and reviewing the podcast on iTunes. Thanks again for joining us, and we will see you right here again at the Idea Talks podcast.